When disaster strikes, where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? That is the purpose of today's video. Let's get to it. Cyber attack, electromagnetic pulse, a serious pandemic, WW3, supervolcanic eruption, or an impact event are but a few of the many existential threats to civilization. Now, 82% of people in North America live in urban environments. That means that it's logistically impossible that everyone is going to have the financial wherewithal in order to own an off-grid retreat or even the ability to access it in times of crisis, even if they had it. But that doesn't mean that you don't have any options. That's going to be the purpose of today's video. The gold standard for preppers is to reside in your bug out location. That is, actually residing in a strategically located place that's going to be largely immune to disaster, and of course has the ability to facilitate a self-reliant life. But this is going to be beyond the means of most people. Now, bugging out is something that's often scoffed at by off-grid preppers because, practically speaking, there are so many challenges to overcome when venturing out into the unknown that most people would not be able to endure the journey, much less the rugged destination that awaits. But the reality is, we all have bills to pay, and that usually necessitates that we live on the grid, which is usually along some sort of disaster fault line. Now, bugging out should be a last resort in an emergency situation. Why would you want to leave the comfort and security of your home to run off into the wilderness where there's a good possibility you'll succumb to exposure or far worse? But the fact is, you may have no other choice. The prospect of being forced out beyond the perimeters of civilization with your family in tow may seem like an unlikely and fantastical situation, but the fact is, anything can happen. Now, preparing for a one-off potential situation like this shouldn't consume an inordinate amount of time if you are a prepper, but it should still be something that you have mentally rehearsed. No matter how well prepared and how dug in you think you are, you may in fact be forced to leave your home, and that's why you need a plan. Now, in most cases, sheltering in place is going to be your best option. That is where you're going to be the most secure, it's where you're going to have the most supplies, and you're also going to have the best knowledge of your surroundings. But what if you had to actually bug out? Where would you go if all hell broke loose? Obviously, in the case of municipal, regional, or even statewide disaster, the solution is going to be bug out to a hotel. But what if we're talking about a disaster that is national in scope? What if this isn't an option? What if in the dead of winter there was no apparent safe place to seek refuge? And what if the cities become uninhabitable or unsafe and you are forced to flee into the nether regions of the country? The fact is, 90% of people don't and will not have a bug out location to flee to, and even if you did, you likely won't have the means to get there. So this video is going to be broken into three main sections: where to go and not to go, how are you going to get there, and what mode of transportation are you going to use to get to your destination. As laid out in a previous video that I did on strategic relocation, the bug out location you select should fulfill a few main criteria. It should be accessible, meaning that you shouldn't need a seaplane or a helicopter to get there, but chances are if you own a plane, then you probably have an island somewhere anyways, so don't even bother watching this video. It should be secure. There should be a way in and another way out. Never back yourself up into a corner. Go watch my video about the 10 layers of home defense if you want more information on how to structure your bug out location. There should be a low population density, but ideally in the company of a trusted community. You are going to need a mixture of skill sets in order to survive long term, not only in the physical and material sense, but also in the mental and emotional sense. You should be near a water source. All great civilizations spring up around a water source. You should also be near a source of fuel. This is likely going to take the form of firewood unless you have access to some sort of chemical combustibles. There should also be a source of food or the ability to grow food. So, foraging, arable land, hunting and gathering, possibly even livestock. It should be away from disaster-prone regions, either natural or man-made. And last but not least, you should have a way of communicating with the outside world at large. If you are bugged out to an isolated region, one of the biggest challenges is going to be information gathering. And you are going to want to know what is going on in the world. So you have to have a means to communicate with the outside world. We're going to be doing a very deep dive video into this in a few weeks. It's going to provide an easy to understand overview of off-grid comms. Information is everything in one of these situations. Now remember that the benefits of bugging to a remote location also come with its share of drawbacks. The further you are removed from civilization, the less you have access to its amenities, or at least the last vestiges thereof after disaster strikes. Post-collapse salvage and scavenging is likely initially going to yield more energy per calorie than gardening or hunting will. It's just a fact. But over time, having the means to grow your own food and grow your own livestock is going to be the ultimate measure of survivability. There's also the issue of security. Now, being off the grid and being away from human threats caused by the desperation that's going to be rampant in the cities, that's one thing. But when you're in the middle of nowhere, no one can hear you scream and no one can come to your rescue. So while you don't have the worst of human nature, you also don't have the best of human nature. Now, if the last year has taught us anything, it's that in the wake of disaster, the majority of people are going to seek guidance from the authorities, and many are going to find themselves flocking to emergency-run government facilities where they are available, FEMA centers, military bases, and other government structures. This is because the majority of people aren't preppers. Now, I'm certainly not saying that this won't be a valid option for some people in some circumstances, but myself personally, the government's ability to effectively respond to a nationwide disaster is likely going to be very limited, so you should not rely on this as a solution. You must consider the reality. You absolutely must consider the reality that you will be on your own and help will not be coming. Historically, this government ineptitude in this regard has been demonstrated on local and regional levels, never mind a nationwide crisis. So the question is, where do you go? Well, if you are forced to leave your home, leave the city, you will ideally want to seek out public land that nobody has the deed to and nobody owns. You're probably going to be hard-pressed to find someone who is willing to open up their property so that you and your family can squat on it in times of crisis, especially if you are being tailed by thousands of refugees. That said, this is not entirely out of the question. Some people may actually be willing to let you stay on their property in your camper or your tents or whatever in return for labor or security. Maybe they need you to help protect that property. That could be a potential value proposition if you are in dire straits. And I know some preppers are probably rolling their eyes, but consider this may be your only option. And if you are a good negotiator, you can present this value proposition to the landowner that you will help them if things get out of control. But again, don't hold your breath, because people will likely be very defensive under these circumstances, particularly people who live in rural environments. Ideally, you would avoid private property. Now, you might think that you'll be able to take advantage of wide swaths of a private rural land and go unnoticed. But the fact is, people who reside in rural communities think in much bigger terms than city folk do. To you, 160 acres might seem like a lot of land, but to a person who lives in that environment and knows it like the back of their hand and is accustomed to the smells, sights, and sounds, they're going to know if you are on their property, and they're going to see you coming long before you see them. If you're talking about having to bug out beyond the suburbs, then you're going to want to look into regional, provincial, national parks, government lands, public lands. These will be places that people are likely going to start to flock to if there was a WW3 scenario. The numbers in these parks are probably going to swell, because think about it, all of the facilities for off-grid living are already present in these parks. They're typically by a water source. There's going to be an abundance of protected wildlife. There will be pre-dug latrines and other off-grid amenities that you're not going to find in the city. Now, as more people flock to these regions, and as supplies begin to dwindle, if there is no centralized control system or agreed upon rules, that's when these communities could potentially become quite unstable. People may decide to work together at first, and you might have an anarchist utopia for the first couple weeks, but when things get desperate, all hell will likely break loose. The next layer out is going to be Crown Land or Bureau of Land Management areas if you're in the United States. These are going to be less accessible, but they're also going to be less known about. This is going to be the high-hanging fruit that not a lot of people are going to want to venture to, and it may present a much wider array of possibilities for off-grid sustainability, but they're also going to be more remote and come with all of the challenges that remote living brings. One of the challenges is going to be getting there. Accessing these places without a boat, a helicopter, a snowmobile, or a quad is going to be challenging. One of the best avenues you can take to get there are going to be logging and mining roads. If you want to go deeper into the fray, the best way to commute in the backwoods is definitely going to be logging roads and mining roads. Anywhere that they do mining and forestry, these roads are going to be everywhere, but they're probably not going to be well maintained, and they're typically only known to hunters because, quite frankly, 99% of people ever veer off the beaten path, even if we're talking about national parks. Most people check out the roadside attractions, go back to their 50-foot glamping trailers, and go home and call it a vacation. But you should be warned that these roads are going to be treacherous, even for many four-wheel drive vehicles. You absolutely would need to have a preset destination in mind if you even considered this possibility. But because the land is so rarely accessed, you can go out and do your own surveying and find a location that might be suitable ahead of time. And if you do decide to embark on something like this, you're definitely going to want to make sure that you have a vehicle that is capable of doing so. Other ideal bug out locations are going to be around lakes. Lakes provide numerous benefits. Obviously, they provide access to an abundant water source. They may also provide access to a food source in fish. And of course, they will be frequented by wildlife who are going to access it for drinking water. So always take note of any game trails in the region. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about urban environments because there's a lot of variables to consider there. There definitely are pros and cons to trying to bug out to another urban environment that may be in partial or total disarray. But I personally would caution against things like staying in abandoned buildings, as these can come with their own share of health hazards. Now, the situation may dictate that that is your only option, and you'll have no choice. You'll just have to practice good operational security, also known as OPSEC. Go and watch my many videos on urban survival to get more information about how you can prepare for this potential outcome. Now, how are you going to get to your destination is the question. The interstates and the main highways may be closed, they may be backed up, you just may not be able to get to your destination using those roads. So you have to have a knowledge of the grid roads, the back roads, the logging roads, the mining roads in your county, even the trails, the bike trails. Have an awareness of these things. We're going to be doing a video in the near future about maps and why it's important to have everything mapped out in advance should this outcome ever come to pass. Understanding the topography and potential traffic choke points is going to be absolutely essential. Now, in going off the main highways, this means that you're going to be likely driving down rougher roads. This means that you're going to be far more likely to pop a tire, especially if you're driving down gravel roads. It's simply only a matter of time before you pop a tire if you're driving on gravel roads a lot. This is why, if possible, you have more than one spare tire, and if possible, a way to fix or seal your tire. Another way of transport are rivers and waterways. I've done an in-depth video on how rivers are nature's roads. I'll post a link in the description. They typically always lead to civilization, and you can use the energy of the river to transport yourself, although it is a one-way street, because although you can do it, the amount of energy that's going to be required to paddle upstream likely is not going to be worth it, especially in fast-moving currents. If you do plan on traveling along the river system, be prepared to meet lots of people, because even in the most remote of locations, people are accessing the river for water. There's also railroad tracks. If lost, railroad tracks are a great way to get yourself back to civilization, because you know that the trains are going to be stopping at every major city. There's a vast network of railroads across North America that you should have some familiarity with in an off-grid situation, because they can be an easy way to travel. The difference between having to bushwhack through unbroken wilderness compared to walking down a railroad track is night and day. So if at all possible, stick to the tracks. But please, if you see a sign that says Terminus, we're here to help, run in the opposite direction, because All American Prepper is there waiting for you. This again is why it's important to have a detailed map. We're going to be talking about that in our next video. Now, a huge part of the urban population in North America lives along a body of water, and a big one. In fact, they live along the coastlines. And as such, having a bug-out boat is not a bad idea. And for that reason, having a plan to get down to the marina with all your bug-out supplies may be a better option than actually trying to get through all of the traffic jams that you're going to encounter in trying to get out of the city by automobile. So having a bug-out boat is not a bad idea if you live in a coastal region. A boat travels the way the crow flies. Hypothetical situation: if there was a nuke dropped on one of the major cities in California, the fastest way to get out would be by boat, because trying to get out when the alarm started sounding by automobile would be absolutely hopeless. I mean, you may be able to retreat into the mountains quick enough, and unless there was some underwater nuke used to detonate some kind of tsunami, the best and fastest way out may be by boat. Now, everything we've talked about so far is where to go and how to get there, but not so much how are you going to live when you get there. Ideally, especially if you had a family, in this case, your vehicle is going to be your best form of shelter. You don't need a tent when you can sleep in your truck or your car. It's far more secure. It's going to be far more well insulated. So that's what you should be preparing to do. Now, a tent is going to have its purpose if you have a bigger party, or if your vehicle is too small, or if you run out of gas and you have to bug out, you can actually transport that tent with you. And of course, if you are in a winter environment, you're going to need to use wood stove fuel, which you're definitely not going to want to use in your car unless you've retrofitted your car to have a wood stove in it. But in most cases, it's likely going to make more sense to stay in your vehicle. Now, a step up from this is going to be a camping trailer or an RV. Personally, I would prefer the camping trailer because you can detach your vehicle then and use it for other purposes. But ideally, you would have within your camping trailer an e-bike. And an e-bike is going to be an invaluable tool after a situation like this, especially if you're venturing into the backcountry. E-bikes can be charged via solar power. You can use them for hunting. You can use them for short commutes. They are stealthy, and they just are going to serve a variety of functions. So ideally, you would have your trailer that is a place where you're living, and you would have your e-bike, and then of course you would have whatever vehicle was towing that trailer. If you have children, there's really going to be no way around it. Investing in a trailer or a decent bug-out vehicle is basically a bug-out location in itself, and it's a bug-out location on wheels. Now, the obvious question is going to be, how much fuel can you have? We are entering an era of electric vehicles, and that is going to open up some possibilities to be able to use your vehicle indefinitely without having any combustible fuel. But we're not quite there yet, but Cybertruck is right around the corner. And last but not least, something we've talked about at length on this channel is you are going to need a way to stay warm. Being in a wooded area is going to provide you with an abundant source of fuel. These are but a few of the many things you will have to consider if you don't have a bug out location and you have to get out of Dodge and you have to get out fast. Let me know what your bug out plans are in the comment section below, without revealing too many of your secrets, of course. And stay tuned, because we have some great videos coming up for you with respect to map making and emergency off-grid communications. So we hope to see you again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Canadian Prepper out. The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com. Your one-stop shop for premium, high-quality, brand-name products that have been tried and tested by myself and other YouTube gear reviewers. My subscribers save 10% off by using the coupon code SURVIVALPREPPER. All one word in all caps.